are ready. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Devs and Bytes. We are very excited to have one presentation with John Coffey. John is very well known, but if you don't know who he is, he's our Director of Information Security at Nextiva. He started as an aeronautical engineer working with GPS back in when it was barely a thing, 30 years ago. And then he had some career twists and turns. He even did some software development. And prior to Nextiva, he managed infrastructure and information security for SaaS applications at Trimble. So please welcome John, and we can start. He will be talking about security and privacy in Nextiva product delivery. Remember that you can add your questions to the chat or just unmute yourself. This is meant to be interactive. So welcome, and thank you, John.
All right, thank you. And yeah, if you have questions along the way, please feel free to ask. I have one little, I guess, maybe interesting fact from 30 years ago when GPS was barely a thing. GPS receivers weighed 40 pounds and barely worked, and there weren't enough satellites up to cover more than a few hours a day. And now everybody in their smartphone has a GPS receiver, and it's just a tiny component of the whole thing. So things have come a long way in 30 years. So, but for this topic, I want to talk about security in our product delivery, and mainly around IT infrastructure and software development. And so we'll get started. The main things I want to talk about is just give some background and overview of the security office and what we do, and then talk about main topics of security and privacy, which are related to each other, but kind of distinctly different things with respect to how we have to deliver products and what we need to think about. And then finally, just some quick general security awareness reminders that everyone should be on top of in their day-to-day lives. So, first thing is, what do I think information security is? Because really, I think everybody has their own opinion, but for me, information security is really about supporting the business and helping it grow by cost effectively managing the risk to our data and to our customers' data. And so the more our customers are confident in our ability to manage the security and privacy of their data, the more sales we can make, and the more we can enable the business to do things in a secure way to support our customers, that really helps drive business by providing HIPAA compliant solutions and other things bring in more sales. So really, the more effective we can be in managing our security and privacy of our customers' data, the better the company can do. Right now, the security office is a pretty small team. It's just 3 people. It's me and then Steve Eibach and Jamie Smith, who are both engineers that work on various aspects of security. And then, there's a lot of information that we have published internally on security. You can find a lot of that on the information security space in Confluence. We've got a lot of documentation on policies and process, and there's also some additional information on the community page, on the internal page under security policies under resources. We also have, if you want to get a hold of us, a Jira Service Desk portal where you can ask questions, make requests, and report suspected incidents. And so, what do we do? And I think I want us to start with what we don't do. And my organization doesn't make the organization secure. That's everybody's job to help do that. What we do is really make it possible to facilitate that within the organization and help everyone do that job. And we do a lot of different things to try to help make that happen. We've established and run the information security program that Nextiva uses, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. And a large part of that is managing risk. we've developed a bunch of security policies and processes to help do that and guide that risk management process. We work with the people team on awareness training. We do a lot of work with legal and sales on assessing vendors and contracts and making sure that our vendors are helping, doing their part in ensuring our security. And we answer a lot of questionnaires from customers that are curious about what our security is and want to know that we're doing the right things to protect their data. We also support and manage a lot of security tools for virus scanning and intrusion detection and code scanning and we do penetration testing and things like that. We support the incident response process for security incidents, and we also do audits, and there's a lot of other things, but that's the main list. And so when I talk about the security program, what does that really mean? And we have a security program is a set of policies and processes that we've put together to help the company work through managing risks and threats to the organization and work through the business objectives of security and compliance that the company has. And the overall program works through just a cycle of planning and implementing policies and controls, evaluating that performance through audits, and then making adjustments and changes, and continually repeating that cycle. So we provide status updates and governance and get governance from the leadership team. Typically go 2 or 3 times a year, and that helps guide what we do and set our objectives for the company and how we support the business. The security program is based on a set of trust principles that come from the SOC, or service operations or service organizational controls, and then those are in turn audited by an outside company against the SOC 2 standard, and they also audit us annually against HIPAA. And those controls and trust principles, we have established the security posture for the company, and then they also support the compliance requirements that we have for our HIPAA fax and HIPAA voice services, PCI for enabling us to take payments securely, and then our FCC requirements around CP&I and data management and managing customer data, and then also privacy, and we're compliant with the California Privacy Compliance Act, and we support the other state privacy regulations. And so then, what do audits mean, and what is SOC, and where are we, and where do we want to go with the business? Today we do what's called a Type 1 audit on our security program against SOC 2, which in SOC 2 is the security framework for SOC audits. And the Type 1 audit means that we have a design of our security program and controls that are sufficient to meet the business needs and support our compliance requirements. And that means that we're doing the kinds of things that we need to do, but that audit is not particularly rigorous. And what our larger customers are looking for from us is a Type 2 audit, which is typically what data centers have and other large businesses use to demonstrate to their customers that they have their security act together. And so we're looking to try to achieve a Type 2 audit in January of 2022, which would be one more audit cycle from now, because our normal audits happen in January. And the purpose there is that you're evaluating the program to show that the controls are operating effectively, right? That we're actually doing what we say we do and what we need to do day in and day out. And so what that means from an IT and infrastructure and development point of view is that we have to have consistent and repeatable actions and process around patching and doing code scanning and remediation of issues, periodic reviews and audits of our firewall settings and access controls and annual DR tests. And these are a lot of things that we've struggled with in the past that we need to, if we're going to get to a type 2 audit, we need to be a lot more rigorous about. And then just a couple things that I think everybody in development and the IT operations area should be aware of is that we do really have security policies and processes that we have to follow, and these have been documented for a while, and you should be aware of what some of these policies say. And I've listed a few of them there, and you can find them on the Confluence page. But we do have a secure software development policy that talks about things that need to be done around security for software, and then policies about how we manage and do patching, how we classify information and how we should be handling it, and some standards for server and network security policies and configurations of systems. All right. And I think a question from Nacho about how can we check that our front-end applications are accomplishing security standards that we have. And so that's a good question, because I was just going to talk about application development and secure software and the controls that we have around our front-end delivery of our apps. We have a, I guess what people call defense in depth. We've got layers of controls, and those come at at the network and an infrastructure level and at the application level. So we have in delivering an application to the internet, we've got sort of three main areas where security is a factor. Out at the edge, we use Imperva as our web application firewall, and they also provide denial of service protection, and they're a content delivery network, so they offload a lot of the static content of our web applications out to the edge of the network to reduce the load on our servers and increase the speed of delivery to our customers. The other thing they do is they provide a very basic level of protection against common web application software vulnerabilities. And these fall within the OWASP top 10. And OWASP is an organization that helps people understand and define security issues and practices around web software development. But they have there's a number of common pitfalls in web software development, like cross-site scripting and SQL injection and other things like that. And the WAF provides I'll say a limited amount of protection for those, but it's a basic thing that stops very simple attacks. And then we get into, from the internet and through the WAF, into our network, and we have firewalls that isolate the DMZ and then ultimately isolate that DMZ from the web application itself. And within the DMZ, we have Nginx, which is our reverse proxy. And the reverse proxy does a lot of things to support the web application and manage the interface between the web apps and the web servers and the internet. But one of the main things it does is it is able to really hide the web server. So we replace error messages so that they don't indicate the version and the type of web server that we're running. And it also is able to do a lot of filtering kinds of things with the input from the internet, so that we can do some WAF-like things in Nginx. And then finally, we get to the web application, and that's really where all the real-world work has to happen, because the WAF is really just a Band-Aid. Nginx doesn't do everything for you, and so you have to understand how to code the application and ensure that the overall application itself is secure. And so that involves making sure that we're writing code that is not vulnerable to typical web vulnerabilities, making sure that we've paid attention and do a good job with authentication and authorization, and looking toward building a zero trust application. And then making sure that we're you have sufficient logging so that we can diagnose issues with the application or attacks. And our applications need to pay attention to privacy as well with respect to customer data that we receive. And I'll talk more about that later. And then another key factor around all of the stuff within our infrastructure is making sure that we're patching all the infrastructure, the operating systems, the middleware, and the included libraries that we link within our applications to make sure that those have as few vulnerabilities as possible. And so all of that is a lot of work that the IT team and development team have to accomplish. And so getting to the how do we try to ensure that the application code itself is secure? And there we're doing three things at sort of three different levels. We do static analysis, dynamic analysis, and penetration testing. The static analysis and dynamic analysis, we use Veracode to do that for us today. And the static analysis is looking at the actual source code itself and looking for indications and patterns in the code that would indicate it might be susceptible to typical web vulnerabilities or a wide variety of different kinds of injection issues or data filtering or other things that might be missing from the code. And again, this certainly isn't perfect, but it does help give an indication of things that might be problems that the development team can go back and investigate and address. It also does evaluation against vulnerabilities in included third-party packages and as well as the licensing of those third-party packages. And this should be part of all of the Jenkins pipelines that do the code builds. Should also be sending the application to Veracode for scanning. The next step is a dynamic analysis where Veracode runs really just a web crawler against the application itself and its running state to find and try to exercise vulnerabilities that might be in the code. And we have this set up today on a few applications, and we need to get it set up on more. But we're typically running those on just on a weekly basis in the RC environment, and those are Veracode can find basic things that way that might either be also seen in static analysis or might be something different because you're pulling in not just the code but all of the other things around the code, the framework and the web server and the as well as Nginx and the firewalls, so that there may be some things that look like they might be issues in static analysis but may not show up in the dynamic analysis. But the dynamic analysis is automated and it's fairly simplistic and it doesn't necessarily catch everything. And then that's where penetration testing comes in. And we're using BugCrowd to do penetration testing, and we set them up to test usually in the RC environment. And we've done this typically on major new releases of code. So we've done it on code we didn't write, but we just released a major upgrade on fax, and we run a BugCrowd test on that. We've done it on CoSpace once, and we're getting set up to do it on CoSpace again. And we're really due to have another round on the platform as well, since we're that's evolved quite a lot since the last time we've done it. But BugCrowd employs a large number of independent security analysts or people who do this for a living often, and they get paid by the bug that they find. So if they find a high severity issue, they get paid more than if they find a low severity issue. So we found that they do provide a pretty good range of coverage and are pretty good for the they're a cost-effective way to do penetration testing. Again, they're not necessarily absolutely rigorous, but they do a pretty good job. And then we also have Steve Eibach, who does quite a lot of independent penetration testing on applications as well, a little bit more on an ad hoc basis, but he's also very good at finding things. So that overall is right how we work to ensure that the code that we're delivering is as secure as we can reasonably make it. We're also in the process of rolling out some training for development on secure coding, and so look for that or more to be coming from that in a week or two. We're just getting it set up now, and are working on planning a curriculum. But I really like this training because it provides a really hands-on, engaged way to learn. They have demo websites that you get the source code for, and they give you guidance on how to actually attack a website using some of the vulnerabilities that are common, and then challenge you to write rewrite the code that in the website to correct for the vulnerabilities. And then there's some additional challenges and other things that we'll be looking to use in that training service that we'll be working on over the next several months. But anyway, I think key things that the developers really need to pay attention to around code development, and as we're building new code and deploying it, some of the key areas that we see as being issues are third-party code is probably one of the bigger ones. We include a lot of third-party libraries and packages with the code we deploy, and we need to pay attention to the vulnerabilities, like pulling in old versions of struts or things like that include major vulnerabilities and expose those in the application potentially. So the Veracode does scan for those vulnerabilities, and we open Jira tickets to get those addressed. But it is important to, if you're starting a new application, start with the latest version of the libraries that you're including, so that we don't start out on our hind feet or on our heels and get a head start on addressing some of these things. You also need to pay attention to licensing on third-party code, particularly the AGPL licensing with web applications is a serious problem, because it requires all of your code to be open source, and that's generally, Nextiva spends a lot of effort developing its code, and it's not something that we want to put at risk. The other major thing that you really have to consider is that you have to assume that any input from any human or any outside source really can't be trusted. You have to make sure that any input is thoroughly filtered, and any output that's based on any input that comes from the outside is also output encoded and filtered, so that you don't have problems like SQL injection or command injection or other things that can arise from those kinds of issues. We also have to pay attention to logging data. It's important to implement audit logs. We and our customers need to know what gets modified by who and when. But we also want to avoid logging any sensitive data in logs, like passwords, session keys, and to some extent personal information that we collect in the applications, because all of those can lead to additional security or privacy concerns with the application and with the infrastructure that's logging all of this stuff. And then really, the last bullet I really wanted to point out is, because we've had a few incidents over the years on this, and a few that we found recently, is don't put Nextiva code into GitHub repositories that are public. Nextiva has a perfectly good Bitbucket account, and you should put your Nextiva code in that. GitHub is fine for your personal projects and experimentation and learning, but don't do that with Nextiva code. All right. Before I go on, are there any questions around application security that I talked about?
I have, oh yeah, we have a question from Jeff. Jeff, sorry.
Yeah, the question is, if we surveyed all teams to ensure that they don't have anything in GitHub? And so we do try to do that. Steve occasionally runs searches across GitHub to look for keywords like Nextiva and stuff like that. And we find some things. Bug Crowd researchers have found things for us that we've not noticed ourselves. And we've even had customers put stuff into GitHub for their own purposes that expose their own customer passwords and things like that. And we've had people from Bug Crowd find those too. So we do try to search those things and catch it when it happens. But right, the best thing I can do is to get the message out to get people not to do it in the first place. And generic question is, based on your earlier slide, can we claim that some or all of our products are PCI compliant? And if so, which ones? So we are a PCI compliant merchant, meaning that we can securely take credit card information from our customers so that they can pay for our services to them. We are not a PCI compliant service provider. And that there's a couple of orders of magnitude of effort difference between being a compliant merchant, the way we do it, and a compliant service provider. So today, right, none of our applications, including our voice services, are PCI compliant. It is something that Phil has talked about as being an objective of his to get to PCI compliance, but I think that's something that's a really long range thing, and would be something after we get to get through a SOC 2 Type 2 audit would be one of the things that we would look to next. It is very challenging because we're not a payment processor or anything, so it's not really something that's necessarily applicable to us, but we do have customers that ask about PCI compliance from time to time, and we would be, I think, well served to at least build a portion of our network that could become PCI compliant. Okay, yeah, Phil says he would like to comment on this as well.
John, what John said is exactly right in terms of the objective of meeting the requirements of the standard. Now, as a sort of a FinCo guy, I will say that technically we could say that today we are PCI compliant. And that's because the scope of the PCI standard applies only to that portion of your environment that processes financial transactions. And that portion of our environment, as John said, is PCI compliant. So it's really not, when it comes to the processing of credit card information, yes, we are compliant, and we can honestly say that. The standard, the PCI standard, basically says that the environment that processes cardholder information has to meet a set of standards. Those standards we don't fully meet across the whole of our environment, and we do today what a lot of merchant processors do, which is we limit the scope of our PCI environment to a very small piece. In fact, we don't even hardly have any of that information even in our environment. And then we say that we're compliant as a result. But the objective of becoming fully compliant of what's in that standard will be achieved when we look at other standards as well. So it's going to be it's a lot of work for us. But as we go for achieving the full SOC 2 compliance and various other security standards, that will come out of it. But it won't be because we want to be a PCI service provider, because we have no goal ever of being someone who basically processes financial transactions or stores credit card numbers or that kind of stuff. That's not in our business plan. But it is one of our objectives to get to that level of security in the environment.
All right. Yeah, as Phil said, there is a portion of our network that is involved in that customer credit card processing, and so that we have a small defined scope for that. But we do have to, right there is patching and other application, not necessarily application, but infrastructure compliance requirements that we have around the web servers and the network that do touch that customer payment data flow. And so, yeah, to that extent, we are PCI compliant, but that's really from a merchant perspective. All right, and then,
we have another question. Yeah.
Yeah. So what are we using to test our code for any injections? I guess pre-prod for deployment. I guess before, I guess, yeah, pre-production deployment. Right. So all of those things that I talked about here, all of those, the static analysis and dynamic analysis, it should be happening prior to production deployment. Because the penetration testing takes a while to get configured and set up and working with the vendor, we generally do that on a sort of a fast follow mode with new applications. But on some critical stuff like the HIPAA stuff that for fax, I usually deploy Steve to do some basic testing first before that goes to production, so that we can make sure that we don't have any really obvious issues that have crept through the other testing. And then we have a number of applications that have been deployed since years ago that have been in production for a long time before we started any of this code scanning and secure process around development. And so we do have, right, there are known issues with known legacy applications, and those are being gradually cleaned up. But we certainly want to make sure that the new stuff that we're developing starts off at the right place and doesn't get into a situation where there are chronic problems and security risks in production. And then we also, as I said, the WAF is a Band-Aid, but it is helpful in cases where we've got known issues with applications that we can usually, to some extent, mitigate those in the web application firewall or in Nginx or in other places as well. So it does help to have these layers of security, because if we can't fix something in one place, we can usually mitigate it or address it in another. All right. I want to spend a few minutes talking about privacy, because this is something that has come up in the world. Really, lots of governments and people have driven this to the forefront in the past, really just 3 or 4 years, and it really driven by realizations about how big companies like Google and Facebook and others have been using people's personal data to their to make trillions of dollars ultimately, and this is now created a government an area of government regulation that's become fast moving. the EU implemented GDPR, which is their general data privacy regulation, in 2018, and then in the U.S., overall the U.S. has been lagging behind the privacy movement quite severely relative to other parts of the world, like the EU. But California's really been the first to act with a comprehensive data privacy regulation of their own that went into effect this year. And it's similar in ways to the EU's regulation, but it's also certainly different and limited in some ways relative to the GDPR rule. And then many states are implementing and considering their own CCPA-like regulations, and I expect that within the next few years, pretty much the GDPR and CCPA type privacy regulations are going to be the normal thing rather than the exception that we have to worry about today. And these regulations have really sort of 4 main components to them that I think, Brett, we should be paying attention to all the time, because this is going to be the way we need to behave going forward with customer data and even our own internal employee data as well. And the first thing is the data has to be secure, right? We have to make sure that we don't let data that's proprietary or personal information of customers or users leak out and be misused for purposes that they're not supposed to be. A lot of the regulations carry defined penalties for data breaches, and these are things that we have to be very cognizant of. And then they expect you to be transparent about how you collect data, what you do with it, why you collect it, and how long you keep it. And this has driven us to write a very comprehensive privacy policy around how what we do with data. And as we develop applications, we need to understand what we're collecting, why we're doing it, and we need to make sure that that's either included in our policy, or if it doesn't, if we don't want it to include in our policy, we need to understand that as well and make sure that we don't do those things if as a business we decide that that's not appropriate. For example, with CCPA, one of the key features of that is around selling of customer data or personal data of consumers. And so it is Nextiva policy that we do not sell any of our customer personal information. And so that's something that everybody here should be aware of, that we don't sell data, and that we state that in our privacy policy. We tell our customers that. We have to make sure our vendors don't do that. And so that's the key thing that we have to be aware of. The next thing is consent, and in GDPR that means opt-in, that you have to get explicit approval from a user to do things with their data, to collect it, to process it. And in the US, we haven't gotten to an opt-in requirement yet, but there is an opt-out where in CCPA, if a customer or user doesn't want you to use their data, they can opt out, and you can't penalize them for it. You have to still provide them the same services at the same cost. And that doesn't really affect us today, because we don't rely on our customers' personal information to drive our business growth. Right, we do sell real products to our customers that they find beneficial, and that's how we grow our business. But we do have there are companies out there that their business is to sell customer data. Right, we buy lead data from other companies, and that's their business, is to sell that personal contact information of people to make money. And then the fourth thing is that the privacy regulations give consumers or people rights to their personal data. And those fall into 2 key areas. One is right to know, where a consumer or user can ask us what data we have on them. And then the second part is the right to delete, that they under certain circumstances can ask us to delete that data. And so we have to have the ability to actually fulfill these requests within our applications. We have to be able to report on what personal data we have, and we have to have the functionality available to where it's necessary to be able to delete that data. I'm not expecting anybody to be able to read this slide, but just to give an idea of what personal data means, it's pretty much anything you can think of that might be information about a person, which either identifies that person or is information that is about them when they're tied to something that identifies them, like their name, or even an email address that's specific enough, like John Coffey at Nextiva.com pretty much identifies me as who I am, right? And so if there's my age or gender is attached to my email address in Paycom, which it is, right? That's personal information. But this extends to all kinds of different things, right? Geolocation data from GPS, like I talked about at the beginning, or even audio recordings, like our voicemails and call recordings are personal information when they're tied to a person. And in that case, right, tied to a phone number, which easily ties it to a person. So that's all definitely personal information in that kind of data. One of the other key pieces of personal information is in the last topic at the bottom right corner here, which is inferences. And so customer sentiment, which is one thing that is an active development area for us to help build value in the CRM and the platform, that is personal information as well. So we have to be aware that, right, all of this information that we generate or may collect is going to be subject to privacy regulations. And so we have to approach privacy with a mind of set of privacy by design. And this is an industry term that's talked about a lot. And it really comes down to just thinking about privacy at the product development stage and how to understand from at the product manager and architect level, what data are we collecting? What do we need to collect? What are we going to do with it? And we shouldn't be collecting more than we need to, and we need to have reasons why we're collecting it. Right, collecting it just because is not a good enough reason. Right? And then we have to understand how long we keep it. And have clear data retention policies around the data that we have. And we need to, if we want to keep data for a long time, how do we anonymize or de-identify that data so that we can keep metrics and statistics for long-term trending and things like that without having that necessarily expose a personal information if it gets breached, because overall, the more data you have, the more and the longer you keep it, the more likely it is going to be breached at some point. And in order to protect that data and keep it secure, we need to be looking at how can we encrypt that personal data at rest. And we, as I talked about before, we really need to have the features available in the applications to allow our customers to fulfill privacy rights requests for the data that they have on their customers. We need to have our support staff or other people who are authorized to do it be able to fulfill those rights requests within in our systems or in our use of our own applications. It can't be DBAs doing that. And that's the way it is today. Or if we get a rights request under CCPA, we've got DBAs and other development people and other tier 2 people right on the team have to go out and collect all of this data and search for it to know that we have it. And that works at the scale that we're at today, because we get so far in the last 7 months we've had 2 requests, and one of those wasn't actually a valid request. So the times we need to do this isn't very often, but it's just California today. So this problem will continue to grow and become more complex. And then I guess my last note around complexity there is that we we are driving toward a distributed data model, and that makes this kind of problem particularly difficult, because we can have personal data in CRM cases, and we can have it in interactions, and we can have it in data warehouse and analytics, and it's not easy to find all of that stuff when a customer asks about it. So we need to think about those things as we're developing applications. And I myself don't have a lot of good recommendations on for how we get that done, but I'm looking to the architects of the applications for help in that area. And I guess we got a question about, do we encrypt at rest today? And yeah, a few months ago, the answer was no. And yeah, generally across the board, the answer is no. We do not encrypt anything other than credentials, passwords, are hashed or encrypted in databases. On HIPAA, we encrypt the voice recordings, and then we use encrypted storage for the HIPAA fax, or the overall VFAX environment, which was built new again, this spring. But that's really the extent of it today. And then I just had a couple reminders for everyone. And this is sort of kind of maybe the boring, repetitive security awareness stuff, but just to make sure that people are keep it top of mind. Social engineering attacks are the best way to penetrate a company and steal information. And so be on the lookout for phishing attacks. The basic rule is that if you weren't expecting it and you didn't go looking for it yourself, don't click on it. And if you think it's suspicious, then it probably is. With a lot of working from home and people doing Zoom meetings in particular, we see a lot of fake Zoom meeting requests that either contain a malware attachment or include some link to a fake Zoom login page or something like that. And the intent there is to try to steal your credentials and then get to your real Zoom account or get to your real email account. We see the most common types of phishing attacks that we have are emails with fake voicemails, fake fax notifications. Finance tends to get a lot of fake like invoices or spreadsheet documents that are 2020 planning or 2021 budget or things like that. Be on the lookout for those kinds of things. And then we have a lot of customers that have and partners of ours that have their emails compromised. Right, they fall they're victims to phishing attacks, and either individuals or whole companies get compromised, and then the attackers send out emails to everybody on the contact lists of those people, and then of course there are our customers or contacts. We're on those lists, and so even if you recognize who you think you might be getting that email from, because we have partners that email into sales operations, or customers that we get CRM cases, and in a lot of cases CRM cases are difficult to tell because the system believes it did come from that customer because that's a valid contact from that customer, and a case gets created. And the other thing that happens is that the CRM case really obfuscates the fact, the details of the email that would be telltale about that it was a phishing attack. And so you just have something that looks fairly reasonable and some attachment there, and those are really enticing to click on. And so we do end up with a lot of phishing attacks within CRM, and we do catch those and get those marked as spam. But they're sometimes our staff click on those things, and so then our AV alarms go off and things like that. At least hopefully they do. And those things are really tough. So anyway, just be watchful for phishing attacks. And then when you're working from home, it's really tough to keep your personal and work life separate. And that's just something you need to be vigilant about. Do work on your work computer. Do games and personal stuff on your home computer. Don't mix those two things together. All right, we've had people install Steam on their Nextiva PCs, and that's not work appropriate. But I can imagine, right, other things go on where people end up doing personal email on their work computer, and then you're just exposing yourself to risk there. Both you and the company when things get mixed back and forth. And don't let your family use your Nextiva PC. Who knows where they're going to try to go? We try to have, we build as much protection as we can, but there's additional risk when someone who doesn't necessarily have the company in mind using the company PC can lead to trouble as well. So that's the end. Do you have somebody have any questions? All right. What are the biggest threats that I worry about? And I think there are really two main threats to the company. One is what I just talked about, which is social engineering and phishing attacks, which can lead to exposure of company data and have our email systems or other data compromised. And then there's the front-end attack on our applications, and that can come from denial of service attacks or exploiting unpatched applications. Right? If we've got third-party libraries that are unpatched or web servers that are unpatched, that the attackers can get through the WAF and get through the Nginx and other things, and compromising our customer data. Right? Those are the two big things I worry about. I think other things are that customers themselves can get compromised, and that's not necessarily our fault, but it does lead to their data being breached, and that's a concern for us as well. A question about I guess what analysis do we do if we find logging and password or session token? That's something that Steve has done. Occasional searches through Splunk, usually to find things like that, and we've raised those. When we found those things, we've raised JIRA issues with the development team to work on getting those fixed. And usually, the effort there is to change the way we log things to either not log those things or obfuscate them or mask them in the log so that we don't have them there. And question about privacy and GDPR and CCPA. Do we have a way of retracting data when our customer opts out? So today, we're not subject to GDPR because we're not selling in Europe, and we don't have customers there, and we don't actively market there, except I guess accidentally if we inadvertently get leads in Europe. But with CCPA and our U.S. privacy laws, the main driver there with opting in and opting out is that is related to marketing and our ability to email or contact customers with marketing information. And marketing has a web portal to allow customers to opt out of that. We have that both for CP&I reasons because we have to follow the FCC CP&I rules about marketing to customers, and then the more general U.S. anti-spamming rules that require you to have an ability for a customer, recipient of an email to opt out of emails. For the applications we sell and the privacy related to that, we include, right, we have our privacy policy for our customers, and really as part of buying the service, they opt in to our privacy policy and the data that we collect. So we don't have to redact or remove data for customers generally. And if they're an active customer, there's really no way to remove data from our systems. So where we would have cases to remove data is supporting our customers responding to a privacy request, or if we have former customers that want data removed that doesn't get removed automatically or removed from our marketing systems and things like that, then those are the areas that are most likely for us to have to honor a delete request. All right. And there's a question about if a customer opts out and 3 months later comes back as a customer, do we retain the data about the customer to start them back, or do we wipe their data? So, if a customer leaves, and generally the customer expectation is that all of their data goes away once they stop being a customer. And we don't do that entirely today because we have some data retention policies that automatically roll off or remove data over time. So if a customer has a 1-year call recording retention policy as a customer and they leave, we still keep that 1 year's worth of data in call recording, and then that every week, or I don't remember exactly the thresholds, but eventually after a year that will all be gone. We don't actively go in and delete that data. Voicemails last for 90 days in the system, and those get purged again on a time-based rule. So, but generally we should be deleting most data for a customer related to their BroadWorks account or their platform account at the point that they leave. And we do have larger enterprise customers that, that's an absolute expectation of theirs, that if they cancel their account, the data will be gone, or will be gone as we say it will be according to our data retention policies. And there is some data we have to keep for a long time. We keep CDRs and billing records for a customer for 7 years or more. And so we have other accounting policies and regulations that we have to follow that require us to keep data longer, even after a customer leaves. But those are all things that we have to manage. And I know Matt Welter's working on some new products and is asking questions about what is the data retention policy for this need to be, because we do have to get better as a company around managing data and data retention.
Awesome. So if we don't have any more questions, I will just say thank you, John, for a great presentation, and also for answering the questions like using the simplicity value. I think that all of us understood what you were saying. So thanks again. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Remember that all of you can become a Devs and Bytes presenter. Just reach out to any Ruth, Terry, or me. And you will find John's presentation and also this video tomorrow on Confluence. We will share the link. Thank you.